Und den ersten Referenten haben wir zugeschaltet aus Dänemark, Ellen Pilgaard Jensen. Und Sie haben es schon eingangs mitbekommen bei den Worten unseres Stadtrats und Mitgastgebers. Wir haben uns verständigt darauf in dem Vorgespräch, wir machen das im Wesentlichen auf Englisch. Er hält seinen Vortrag auf Englisch und er versteht zwar Deutsch, aber das eine oder andere, glaube ich, fällt ihm naturgemäß in einer anderen Sprache einfacher. So let's switch to English. Hello, Ellen. Maybe you can see him on the screen. Hello to Denmark. Ellen
Hello.
is director of a private-public partnership called Project Zero. They are founded in back in 27, and their aim was back then to be CO2 neutral until 2029. And for us, it will be very interesting to hear his ideas, what his path until now was, where problems on the way to their success lied, and what the situation today is and how far away you are from reaching your goal. So, Ellen, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the nice introduction. My name is Ellen Pilgaard Jensen, and Managing Director of Project Zero, a public-private partnership, as just mentioned. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very delighted to be able to share with you how we work with the green transition in Sonderborg. I will share my screen right away, and I hope everything works fine. Just a second. Here we go. I assume that it works. I would like to share with you how we work as a public-private partnership, how this governance model works, and of course about our decarbonization model and what we have achieved so far here in 26. Also, I will dig into the decarbonization of the heating system, which I know is also very important for Regensburg. And I will touch upon these topics more specifically. So first of all, I would like to make sure that you know Sonderborg. Sonderborg is right just half an hour's drive from Flensburg, a municipality of 74 inhabitants, so less than half of Regensburg. But we are a quite international society with 120 nationalities here, and an industry very much focused on electronics and mechanical technology, which is really focusing on the green transition. We also have a university, quite a fast-growing university, also very much focused on the technical side. Project Zero, as just mentioned, back in 2007, business people actually talked about how should we focus in the years to come in order to create growth in the area, and they soon got contact and agreement with the political part about setting the goal of 29 for decarbonizing the energy system. So it's about being CO2 neutral in the energy system in 29. It has been what we call a lighthouse project since the beginning. So there is consensus across the city council, across parties in the city council of 31 members, that this is a strategic and important project for Sonderborg. We are part of the EU mission, Climate Neutral and Smart Cities, where 112 European cities are selected to be frontrunners towards 2030. And in Denmark, it's Copenhagen, Aarhus, the second largest city, and Sonderborg that represent Denmark. And we are very focused on reducing the energy consumption, because we all know that the need for green energy is huge going forward. So we need really to focus on how we can also reduce the energy as much as possible. It's about the energy system here. Of course, we also have emissions from land and animals, the agricultural challenge, you could say. And this is a separate track in the municipality, but the energy part is run by the public-private partnership Project Zero. And of course, it is extremely relevant, because if you look globally, close to 90% of the CO2 emissions actually come from energy. And you can say that the agenda has developed in the last couple of years. Now it's not only about climate, it's also about independence and security. Europe needs to be independent of fossil energy, and it goes very well with our climate targets. So it's a really good combination. I believe it is also important in our communication with all stakeholders, and not least with those of the citizens that are still hesitant when it comes to the climate agenda. We need to make sure that we get affordable energy for citizens, and that we have competitiveness for the European industry. So we need to be independent of fossils from outside, and I think that's a new and very important agenda to come. When it comes to Project Zero, we look at it at this, you could say, this simple formula, you could say, that first of all, you need to have a bold aspiration. That was the one made back in 2007 for our part. And then, of course, you also need to ensure local support. That is really essential. I'll come back to this, of course. Then you need a very strong master plan, a very specific master plan with targets and plans that support that, and not just high-level milestones, but very specific plans that we can work on. And then you need to organize the action and execute. And of course, also follow up. Like in any business plan, you need to follow up, you need to have KPIs and follow up closely to be able to reach your targets. And we follow up on this on a quarterly basis on all the KPIs that we have for each and every part. At the first point, local engagement, just to say, where did we start? In 2007, we had 700,000 tons of CO2 in our energy system, and we aim for CO2 neutrality in 2029. And when it comes to the local stakeholders, as I mentioned, the municipality, the city council of 31 members is, of course, very important. The political leadership here, together with the leadership from other stakeholders in the energy system, of course, industry, the utilities, also university and house owners, and not least also the banks are important in this game. So we need to engage all stakeholders around a bold aspiration. What is a cost-effective master plan? Well, as I mentioned, we are very much focused on energy efficiency first. We need to make sure that we limit the, you could say, the energy needed to produce the green energy we need to produce. Therefore, energy efficient in every part in buildings, in production. We need to switch, of course, to heat pumps and district heating, as you know, and electric vehicles, which are by far more, you could say, cost-effective than combustion engines. So electrify all possible. We also need to reuse the energy that we have already used once, because we have a lot of excess heat in our industry, in hospitals, data centers, and so on. I will make very specific examples in a moment. And we need to reuse this in order to make our transition more energy efficient and thereby more cost efficient. And I will show you examples that this is really cost effective. Of course, we need green energy. We need biogas where we need gas, because we only need to use, or we should only use gas where it is absolutely necessary. That means on the high temperatures. You can use district heating and, of course, heat pumps, high temperature heat pumps, up to 80 degrees Celsius on district heating and up to about 130 degrees Celsius in heat pumps now, and that is being more and more improved. So only gas where absolutely needed. In Sønderborg, we need quite a lot of gas because we have a lot of brick manufacturing that is with 1,000 degrees Celsius. The brick manufacturing industry in Sønderborg is half of the production that we have in Denmark. So we have a lot of gas need there. Still, with the biogas plants that we have in the area that are connected to the gas grid, we can now cover our consumption. So now we are starting to also being able to provide biogas to the rest of the gas network in Denmark, and for that sake Europe, because you know the gas net is of course totally connected in Europe, and you could say the need is of course huge. District heating needs to be carbon neutral, and we are also very much focused on solar and wind. And as I've also heard from other dialogues with all other German areas, you also see the tendency at the moment that it's not that easy to get solar and wind installed. So you need to make sure that we keep on pressing on this and make it, you could say, have the demand so that you can really make that a good business case as well. We have a new coastal windmill park coming up, as you can see in the upper left or upper right corner. And with that coming up in 2030, we will be able to cover our electricity consumption, which we will of course see rising very much in the years to come due to the electrification. How do we do this? We organize our actions in what we call hotspots. You see here the sectors that, of course, the energy sectors, the energy production, and the consumption in industry, in transport, and in buildings. And the Project Zero team is a small team of 6 full-time employed and 2 student workers who coordinate, facilitate, and keep all the stakeholders that we engage on track and inspire and make sure that there's always something in it for them, because it's a combination of having the overall joint target ambition together and what's in it for each of the stakeholders that actually can make a difference here. Then we have an owner who takes care of each of these areas. We call them hotspots because we need to decarbonize in each and every of these hotspots in order to be able to reach our overall target. Just an example of that for homes, decarbonizing homes by district heating and single house heat pumps. We have an owner, he's called Morten Vestergaard. He is the director of a bank service company, and then there is a project manager from my organization that is the project manager, and then he runs this working group focused on decarbonizing the homes. And that is exactly what we do on across all the different areas that you see here, both on the consumption price part, on the infrastructure, and on the energy production. We have specific plans for each of these areas with hotspot owners taking that ownership of that specific part so that we can get to our overall target. The governance here, as you see, Project Zero is a foundation with the municipality and industry, and the Project Zero Foundation board The mayor is represented, and also high-level industry leaders, utilities, university, bank sector. And then we also have a board that is closer to the daily operation with representatives from same categories. And some of these, for instance, Morten Vestergaard that I just showed you, he's also part of the board. And that means that you have, you have the different stakeholders engaged, and it's important that you have high-level representatives engaged in the overall management of the project. So that is the way you could say integrate the public and private stakeholders in the work. So what have we reached so far? We are at 75% in 24. We are very close to releasing the 25 figures, and it's still we are still following our plan. You see here that in 2007 we have this 700,000 tons of CO2 and 75% in 24. Of course, the last part is, as always, the most difficult part. Especially the absolute last 10% will be the hardest part to reach. But it's important for me to show here that when you see the first part of the journey, 1/3 of the reductions came from energy efficiency. So the carbon reductions, they came from energy efficiency. And when you look at the cost, the total investments that we have estimated for the whole period, only 1/3 of the investments in the first part, and then the latter part where you have the very heavy investments on the last part, which is the most expensive part. My point here, of course, being focus on the good business cases at the beginning. That is really important. District heating is the backbone of the energy system in Sonderborg. You could say that district heating is like a thermos. It's the cheapest way of storing energy, so you can utilize the renewable energy the most cost-effective way. This is, of course, being combined more and more with battery systems that we use more and more. I know you do it as well. But the unique thing is that you can also reuse waste heat, as I mentioned, from many processes. And therefore, we believe that the district heating network is a very good backbone for storing energy and to reuse energy in our system. And when you talk about excess heat from cooling processes, I have two examples here. We have a local hospital that has installed heat pumps both for cooling processes and also for heating processes. And of course, there is a lot of cooling for scanners and all other medical equipment. And the excess heat from these cooling processes can cover almost all the heat demand of that hospital. So you really need to reuse the energy internally. In this case, it is also connected to the district heating network. And during summertime, you can also supply heat into the district heating network. There is excess of heat also. But the business case here is on the internal reuse of the energy. You see exactly the same for supermarkets. We have a chain of 12 local supermarkets here that if within the last 12 years have reduced energy by more than 50%, and they cover also 80% of their own heat from excess heat from coolers and freezers. And we talk about business case here of 3 to 4 years. So it's really just to get started, because it is a very good business case. Sector coupling is, of course, about technology, but it is just as much about connecting people. Here you see an example of an area in the municipality where small villages, they would like to get to get connected to the district heating network, but it was too far away. So the district heating company refused in the first part. But then we start having a discussion on possibilities, and also the local slaughterhouse company, Danish Crown is a Danish slaughterhouse company, were contacted because we believed that we could utilize the excess heat from that one. But they said, okay, that might be possible, but let's also talk about using district heating for our process. And it turned out that half of their energy production could be covered by district heating, and that is equal to more than 1,000 standard homes. And that was actually driving the project for also the small villages, and you only have in the range of 100 or 200 houses per village there, and they got cheaper district heating. And you even see a bicycle here. And why is that? Well, the municipality and the district heating company, they actually succeeded in combining the efforts here, because there is a plan for making a bicycle lane. And now it is combined, you know, the timing is combined so that you make the construction of the district heating and the bicycle lane at the same time. The bricks up here that you see together with the pig is about the brick companies. They are situated around here, and you can utilize the excess heat from that in order to also make the energy more cost efficient. Good. And you could say district heating, do we use district heating everywhere? No, that is not possible, of course. I'm sure you know about that. But our target is to utilize district heating or to install district heating as much as possible for the arguments that I just made. Then we also look at, you could say, satellites of district heating. We call it local heating, where there is a very remote village that could have a district heating. In our case, we have so much integrated district heating that the small remote ones are too small because it's not compatible, or you could say competitive, to individual heat pumps. And then, of course, we apply individual heat pumps. This planning of the overall heating system is done in a close cooperation between the municipality, the district heating companies, and the targets of Project Zero. Then it is also essential when you talk about citizens that you communicate very specific, very targeted towards the citizens, because the villages here, they may look the same, and they may the initiatives may also look like the same, but you need to communicate very targeted to the villages so that they can actually relate to the communication that this is specifically for us. That is very important in our communication in order to reach the citizens. It's also, of course, important to understand your stakeholders. In our case, many of the small villages tend to have more elderly residents and also generally older houses. So you need to relate to that. And what we have done here to make it make it more attractive for the residents here is that we have made a joint project on with a shared heat pump quotes for 100 heat pumps. And we work together with village associations. It's very important to work with the local societies to collect interest, to host meetings. And then we have an independent consultant to make a tender and collect quotes from pre-qualified heat pumps so that they actually get a quantity discount. The contract is made directly with between the individual home and the district heat, the heat pump supplier, but this makes it possible to actually get the quantities, the quantity discounts. And the other point, as I mentioned, is that they are actually guided here, and that is extremely important. One thing is that you want to do this, but it can look very difficult for many citizens. So you need to guide, and that has made a big impact as well. We are running this right now, so we are. Of course, very excited to see the final results. Okay, a summary, I think we are there. So first of all, we believe that is the experience from our side, that public-private partnership really can make a difference. You need to bring together the stakeholders on a joint mission. And the organization of the work is also important, because we believe that when you combine the efforts and you coordinate and facilitate across the different stakeholders and hotspots, as we call them, then you get more effect. That is really what we see. And in the end, it's all about passionate people driving the agenda and thereby engaging other people. That was what started Project Zero back in 2007, and that is still what is extremely important in our daily work. So to end with this, the small zero for Sonderborg, we hope we can inspire others to make the zero even bigger. So thank you for this, and I would like to very much like, of course, to answer if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alan, to Sonderborg, for this interesting talk and for the insights you gave us. I hope you can see us. And in preparation of today's event, we talked briefly about the possibility of getting you some of our audience's questions. And we decided to give you the opportunity to ask in German, and I will try to translate it in English if he can't understand it. So, fühlen Sie sich frei, auf Deutsch Ihre Fragen zu stellen, wenn Sie wollen. Wenn Sie es mir einfach machen möchten, direkt auf Englisch. Dann sparen wir Zeit und er kann es direkt beantworten. Wer möchte? Niemand möchte. Ich hab damit gerechnet, dass das niemand möchte, wenn wir nur Englisch fragen lassen, aber auf Deutsch auch niemand. Ah doch, wir haben eine Frage von da hinten.
Hey Alan, Lukas Torst, and my question is, what do you think about the German fear against heat pumps and how to overcome it?
Well, I would say the fear is, as far as I've heard, the fear is about that it will not be able to heat up your house. And I don't know whether you talk about homes in general, or you also talk about heat pumps for industry. But for homes, we also have had this discussion, and you simply have to. It's of course about informing, and you need to be. We have also seen that many in the early stage of the transition. Many have got a heat pump that doesn't fit your exact needs in the house, so that you don't have the capacity you need. So that is extremely important, and that is also the reason why we engaged a consultant for this action that I mentioned at the last part, because then they make sure that it's an independent consultant, making sure that the quote for the specific home is the right one, that it fits the need. So it's very much about making sure that it fits the need. When it comes to industry, I believe that was not your question, but I think the general trend is that, as I also mentioned, you get higher temperatures within heat pumps now, and 130 degrees is not a problem today. And you have extremely many applications, for instance, in food industry, where you get to that level, and you can electrify that. So you need to electrify all you can so that we save the gas for where we really need it.
Thank you. And any other questions? Da hinten haben wir noch eine, sehe ich gerade. Und von hier habe ich was gehört. Einen Moment.
Hello, Max Mischenborn speaking. I have two questions. The first one, which price level did you achieve? If you compare the price what the people pay for energy compared to other cities that did not decarbonize that massively, are you above or below? And the second question is, what is the overall acceptance? It looks very good what you present, but how is it seen by the population and by industry?
I would say that comparing to other cities, I would say in general, what we are doing in Sonneborg here on the heat pump and the transition here on from gas and oil boilers to heat pumps, that and also district heating, that is the trend you see all over Denmark. So I would say compared to gas prices. We need to make sure before we convert, we need to district heating, we need to make sure that we can actually make it cheaper than an individual heat pump. So that is always the focus that that the district heating projects, they must be competitive to heat pumps. And we do see that both district heating and gas boilers, they are competitive now, but of course gas prices are running up and down, and we also see that in the acceptance in the market or in by the citizens. Of course, during the energy crisis, everybody wanted to do it. Now then you have a lack in after some years, and now you see a new energy crisis. So of course we also see the fluctuations depending on that. But as I mentioned at the beginning, I believe that more and more you will see also the independence of fossils from outside is also making a difference. So I believe that's an important part of the communication going forward.
Thanks, Alan, for answering the questions and for giving us your talk and your insights.